Good morning, good morning, good morning. It's Wednesday. You tuned in to the I'm Making It Happen radio show on the Reef 103.5 FM with exceptionally yours, Nykole Tyson. And we are here every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And on I'm Making It Happen, we discuss how we can make it happen in our minds, bodies, finances, business, and culture, despite the inevitable and not so pleasant challenges. And that's to ultimately shift our mindsets and allow us to realize that we have the power to improve and maneuver every and any situation. And today, I'm so excited that we have an honorable guest this morning, His Excellency John Akel Ballout Jr., and he is the ambassador from Liberia to Nigeria. And he works at the Embassy of the Republic of Liberia, Abuja. And he is actually right now in Nigeria, and it is 4:19 p.m. their time. So I really appreciate him taking the time to be with us in his busy schedule. And before we get into the details, I definitely want to say good morning to everyone in the USVI, St. Croix, St. Thomas, St. John, the British Virgin Islands, St. Kitts and Nevis, and anywhere you are in the world, in the Caribbean. Thanks so much for tuning in, as well as all those listening live from reefbroadcasting.com from the east to the west coast. Good morning to you, and to all those wherever you are in the world. We appreciate you. And good morning to those watching live on Facebook. Good morning. So you might, we're doing this through Facebook right now. So I definitely encourage anyone that's listening to tune in to our Facebook page, because we're actually carrying this show directly from Facebook, and not anything technical in the studio per se with audio. So everything is on Facebook, and you can definitely interact with the ambassador on our Facebook page. And we'll also take questions if you have any. But the most exciting thing about this conversation is about the USVI and the Liberia connection. And we're going to be talking about individual Edward Blyden, Wilmot Blyden, who had an instrumental influence in the formation of Liberia, and he was from St. Thomas. And so the connection between the U.S. Virgin Islands and Liberia is part of a powerful historical journey starting from the 1800s, and we'll get that information from Ambassador Ballout and more. But I did want to say that I met Ambassador Ballout when I was in Nigeria, and while he was on stage, he was, one of the guest speakers. And when he was speaking, he mentioned Edward Wilmot Blyden and the Virgin Islands. And I was like, I wanted to put my hand up and say, I'm here from the Virgin Islands. And I was so excited because, I was the only one there from the Virgin Islands, from what I understand. And I went up to him afterwards, and I did introduce myself and made it a point to let him know that I was from the Virgin Islands, and that I appreciated him mentioning that. And then we shared more, and we shared the information, or we shared contacts. And so I felt like it was really awesome and interesting to have this conversation. So as I was mentioning, I'll just let us get started and let them know. This is Ambassador Ballout, John Ballout. He's amazing in Liberia, is very down to earth, and was, made himself available to have this conversation. And let's see, today's conversation is the one that reaches across oceans, across generations, straight into our identity as a people. And many may not realize, and I had this similar conversations with people. They didn't even realize that the story of Liberia and the VI. But Liberia is Africa's first republic, and is deeply connected to the Caribbean, including the Virgin Islands. Before we were even the Virgin Islands, it was Danish. So through the movement of formerly enslaved people, including individuals from this region of the Caribbean, a new nation was formed. So I want to just get started and appreciate again our distinguished, His Excellency John Akel Ballout. Good morning and welcome.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. And it was really nice meeting you the last time here in Abuja. I found you still find you quite fascinating and very passionate about this. And true to my
Hold on.
own thinking.
Hold on 1 second.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Am I loud and clear?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I'm quite pleased that you called to have this interview, knowing that we're going to further our conversation and extending it to a broader audience and maybe a follow up to the first um, presentation you made back home. So yes, I'm quite pleased and grateful that you had this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so, how's the weather today in Nigeria?
Well, it's getting kind of cloudy. Here it is about 4:25 and it's getting cloudy. So I guess that's some of the reason we had some problems with the internet earlier. But I think the signal is good now and everything seems to be going well.
Perfect. So, let's see. Can you give us a brief overview of your role as ambassador of Liberia to Nigeria?
I'm sorry, would you please, do you mind repeating?
Can you give us a brief overview of your role as ambassador of Liberia to Nigeria?
Oh, yeah, thank you. Um, Liberia and Nigeria share more than just a community in West Africa, but in our most immediate trouble past, Nigeria was most um, instrumental, most engaging as the leading stabilizing force in our most recent conflict we had some years ago. That the civil crisis, Nigeria had, contributed the most to our peacekeeping efforts and reestablishment of democracy in Liberia. Thanks to them, thanks to their effort, we've had 20 years of uninterrupted peace. We've had 4 successful elections without any political or major incident. And so, yes, Liberia is on course because of what Nigeria has done by leading ECOWAS, the West African countries, to mediate in our conflict and help restore democracy. So my being here, beyond the traditional role of representing the interests of Liberia, coordinating with Nigeria and the citizens of this country, whether it is political, diplomatic, economic, or cultural, I'm particularly pleased to be here, owing to the fact that I come with a sense of indebtedness to Nigeria, gratitude for the role they played in helping us when the global powers and those that we look up to failed to play this role. Nigeria came into the rescue of Liberia, leading West African states that we all hold them a lot of gratitude. So my being here is to further cement the already existing brotherly and sisterly ties between Liberia and Nigeria, but to take it further to a point that we kind of merge our people in our countries in all aspects, be it economic, cultural, whatever, people to people diplomacy, encouraging tourism, encouraging investment, encouraging just a common working knowledge and appreciation of our culture and our history and interface in our economy. That's so I find it very exciting. And what makes it even easier is good nature of the Nigerian government and people. Um, we don't experience any cultural shock. We don't experience any difficulties adapting. I've been here 6 months in Nigeria and I'm already fitted in. I've received nothing but enormous endorsement and welcome by the people of Nigeria. We share common culture, common food, common values. So it is quite in my way, comfortable working here.
Yes, and I would like to mention that the same when I was in Nigeria. It felt the same way. It felt like the same culture, same foods, although it was very spicy. Pepper is the name of every food in Nigeria. But other than that, everything I've realized that we were really just Africans in the Caribbean because everything, the foods, boiled plantain, fried plantain, and all the different dishes, as well as just the mannerisms, was similar to what I see and experience and have been a part of as a culture here in the Caribbean. And so that was amazing to see. And I was in awe to see there's so much similarities with us in the Caribbean and in West Africa, because I don't think many people really associate themselves from the Caribbean as we know we're African descent, but to really know that we have maintained the culture throughout the centuries here in the Caribbean, that we're so similar. So I
What is
do.
interesting that you mentioned that, because not everything is captured. You know, certain things are just infer. Um, you have people world apart, but similar culture, similar food, similar taste, similar values. That speaks volumes. You know, speaks volumes because when you took people from their roots, you also took with them their values and their
Mhm.
culture. And you probably made up, they probably put chains, but the interaction, the value they share, the transfer of this culture and the values, whether it's oral, they still manage to survive the test of time and manifest themselves today. So that's why even you, I saw you when you came here. You fitted so well in place. You know, you hardly believe that probably you were your first time or something like that here. You were already blended in. That nobody could tell the difference between you and an average Nigerian. I almost took you for a Nigerian journalist. So that's how much similarities we have, despite the distance and time.
Yes. It's still touching when I think about it, right? Is that we feel so far removed and we're not. And like you said, our orals, our culture, our values have managed to survive. And that's the wording, survived all this time. And being that it was my first time, I felt at home, there, and I felt welcomed in Nigeria. And so to get into that, you're talking about, like you said, the enslaved from that came from West Africa through the Atlantic, that we through the Caribbean, and we maintain that. What was your feeling first accepting the invitation from a Korean consul, right, as being a speaker? Was one way of being a speaker, and you took that on and say you're going to speak on these things in regards to connecting the Caribbean with Africa, is one thing of accepting the invitation. But how did you feel once you delivered your statements at the conference, and also seeing all of the people from the from the Caribbean, Africans from the Caribbean come in to witness and engage and interact with all what was happening? What was your feeling like after you delivered and was able to interact with everyone?
Well, to begin with, I think is um, worth mentioning how impressed I was to see such a all-inclusive, powerful delegation that came from the Caribbean. You know, I saw um, Africans seeking to identify with their roots in their numbers. Okay, and it didn't just happen. There was a conversation before putting all of this together, and there is an objective. There's a motive behind the conversation, and that conversation materialized into a delegation. That delegation came here and impressed everyone. I mean, not only did I see ministers, prime ministers, or not only did I see professionals, I also saw the youth, the young ones that he brought. And the fact that they were here for 6 days, they planted trees, they interacted, they mixed with the people, they had a joint cultural performance. Wow, I must say thanks to that delegation through this media, and thank you for being part of it. I felt obliged to approach the delegation, not just from theoretical, but something closer to home that they could identify with. Like I said, like the Caribbeans, Liberia is unique in this whole slave trade venture. Um, Africans were stolen and enslaved, taken away from West Africa and other parts. But from the West African side, they were taken from countries like Nigeria, Benin, Senegal, Ghana, and the rest, you know. But when, upon the abolition of slave trade, and they had a choice to return home, they returned to Liberia, okay, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. But to settle in Sierra Leone, they had some difficulties, so they moved over to Liberia to settle in Liberia. So Liberia is very critical in this discussion. I mean, it's so critical that I made mention of one of your own from the U.S. Virgin Islands, okay, Wilmot Blyden, Edward Wilmot Blyden. He was in our setting, and I'm sure at your place as well, the father of Pan-Africanism. He was someone who ran through the ranks of fires in Liberia. He came with a message to spread education, empower the African race. He became a teacher, principal of a school, secretary of state, secretary of education in the Liberian government. When he had surmised his achievement in Liberia, he moved over to the Sierra Leone and repeated the same thing. There was a man who was not limited to the geographic space or setting of Liberia. He had to go to Sierra Leone. And yes, he established himself as an authority in education and activism in consciousness, and he is largely respected here today. So yes, we do hold, and that's just one of the cases. I made mention of the Barbados. The Barbados is another very critical section that as far back as I think 1865, the whole delegation of a whole group in the hundreds moved over to Liberia. Of course, trying to get as far away as possible from slave masters and the memories of slavery. They came to Liberia, they settled in an area called Cruiserville. And so today that is a traditional setting of the citizens of Barbados. Though they are very much integrated today, and we're all known as Liberians, but of course they have their own history. So we do have names like Barclays, we have names like Ports, we have names like Padmore, and the rest. We do have two presidents that came from Barbados origin. Okay, so we have Edwin Barclay and Arthur Barclay. So these are undeniable. This is a kind of a link that goes beyond, rhetorics. It's practical. So when you came across the Atlantic coming to West Africa, you're in Nigeria, and you think you're exploring. No, you already have your roots planted. You already have our history interlinked. You already have a lot of things in common that is not sufficiently told. So yes, through you, a lot of people may be discovering this. Liberia had her independence 1847. We've had 26 presidents. We are, if not, one of the oldest democracy. We were founding members of the League of Nations, founding members of the United Nations, founding members and initiator of the Organization of African Unity, and subsequently the African Union. Liberia being free, independent, and having its independent posture and position at the League of Nations, where discussions were held, where African countries were still enslaved, colonized and suppressed. Liberia spoke on behalf of Africa. We led these discussions. So yes, Liberia has played a pivotal role and continues to play. So what remains to be seen is how we go beyond all of this, like Barbados has done in recent time. We've had the leaders of Barbados over into Liberia sometime last year and a couple of months ago, and we signed a visa waiver between the Barbados and Liberia. So people are moving, and then we signed a framework agreement for political consultations. If you remember, I spoke about strength in unity. We know that Africa has been denied, suppressed, robbed, and enslaved. And those who've done that continue to remain unapologetic. And decisions are made at the United Nations and through voting. Today, with 54 African states, your 13 states, and a few other African nations put together, we constitute the largest voting bloc on the planet. So yes, we have a voice. Individually, we may be marginalized, but united we stand, divided we fall.
Mm-hmm.
And after I spoke about that, you saw what happened at the United Nations when Ghana put forth, backed by the Caribbeans, backed by Africa, supported by that, about making slavery the worst crime against humanity. That passed overwhelmingly. Even those who opposed it found it difficult to stand up without shaming themselves permanently. Today, yes, we have some countries that carry that shame and will remain with them. The United States, Israel, and Argentina. But there are other countries who wanted to vote against, but the worst or the least they could do was to abstain because they were overwhelmed by the overdriving uh, 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 unity of the African countries and into that with a powerful vote. So these things happen, and we have a chance. We've seen it. It's worked. We need to make it work and probably take it beyond to try to deal with this veto power that disturbs the world today. We as a bloc can lead these discussions because we've done it with this one and we can do it again because there's unity in strength. And more than any other race, the African race, the enslaved race, the colonized race, the abused race has more to gain by working together and changing the system that has caused the harm and holding them accountable. Today, we've established it as the worst crime in human history. We need to go forward and put forth what you are talking about right now in the Caribbean, what's being spoken about right now in Africa, and speak of a reparation and holding those criminal countries accountable. So that speaks to the unitary strength and how we work together on these kind of important agenda that affect our collective future because of the harm they've done to all of us.
And I do agree about unity because what I found very heartwarming was that there has been a continuous conversation in West Africa, and maybe all throughout Africa, about connecting and collaborating with the Caribbean, and not realizing that even though that we are these many small islands, that we could unite with Africa and be a voting bloc, like you said, in with the United Nations, if we unite. And so that was interesting to see how we could unite as a region, how we can unite as regions and have an impact. Like you mentioned, in the United Nations, while we were in Nigeria, they were considering that legislation or that legislation in the United Nations, and it passed. And that was a conversation there. Also, what was interesting was the fact is that, taking our power and figuring out where these narratives comes from. Jessica, you mentioned about Africa, has been what's the word I want to say? That has been stolen so many things. The people, the culture, just even now it's been made to seem like a country that doesn't have much, but it has everything. Changing the narrative and being in control of the narrative, because we have been given a narrative, and now we need to dissect what our own narrative is going to be. Because I was mentioning on my show like last week is that when we travel to Europe, nobody's afraid to go to Europe. But like when I was going to in Nigeria, there were so many fears about me going to Nigeria, and as many people go to other parts of Africa. Why is that? Why don't we have fear to go to Europe? But there's so much fear to go to our continent. And so changing that narrative, right? And so that's where this conversation started, where St. Kitts and Nevis, by way of the Korean consult, gathered all these individuals throughout the Caribbean to start this conversation to change this narrative. Also, what I wanted to mention was I don't know if we should have this conversation now, but about how it all started, right? How the slave trade started, because there was a narrative, and I don't think we should go into it as detail now. I don't know if it could be succinct, but when we were talking
go
about
ahead.
we could do it.
Where Africans sold the slaves, is that what you want to talk about? What they say?
Yeah.
But they're all crap. They're all crap. Okay? These people commit crime and try to justify the crime by shifting the blame and shifting the attention. No, nobody sold slaves to them. You came here. Nobody went to Europe to tell you we have slaves to sell. All right? They came to Africa. They suppressed people. They divided people. They brought this concept. They bought slaves. And at no point in time should anyone shift it. Not because you have one or two person they had put on the side to connive with and carried out the satanic and devilish plan of enslaving people. Nobody told them to take slaves by the millions on ships and dump half of them in the ocean because of insurance money. Nobody told them to chain slaves up to months before they get to their destination. Nobody told them to stand slaves up, check them up, look at it and sell them, depend on price. Nobody told them to separate families upon arrival, children sold, mothers sold, and fathers sold differently. Nobody told them to lynch slaves every day that they had. Nobody told them to rape the slaves' wives while their husbands were there. Nobody told them any of these. And we should stop listening to that crap and perpetrating, doing further spreading that's kind of nonsense. We need to remain focused on the crime. They were criminals. They're evil. They came from where they are, brought ships with the design and intention of stealing Africans to sell them as slaves. And let me introduce some other factor that you must take into consideration. There are some people who think that the slave trade was just about American slave traders, British, UK, and the English slave traders, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and French. And people think that's all to it. No. Every aspect of slavery, whether it was in Africa, whether it was in the Middle East, the trans-Saharan slave trade, whether it was in Portugal, Spain, England, United States, France, there's one group that was present at every point of slave trade and profiteering as the Jewish community. The Jewish people were selling slaves in Africa, they were selling slaves in the Middle East, they were selling slaves in Portugal, they were selling slaves in Spain, France, and the United States and England. No other group was anywhere else selling slaves except the Jews. They are nowhere mentioned in this debate. And at some point in time, they make it look like other people have done it, but not. And when you go to Google it, they'll tell you, say, yes, the Jews were there, but it was European Christians mostly. European Christians were not in Middle East selling slaves. They were not in Africa. The Jews were everywhere. So this debate, when it comes out, it has to come out in a fold. No wonder why they oppose the bill, the vote at the United Nations. No wonder why the other Jewish guy in Argentina also opposed it in the United Nations. No wonder why they control the guy over the United States. They opposed it into the United Nations. We must remain focused on the perpetrators, on the evil people who committed these things, and we should name and shame all of them, not to take anyone out of the equation. Today with the internet, you can research. And when I speak with this kind of passion, because it is so inhumane, it's so evil to just imagine this. And today, you're not sufficiently discussing it because they control the narrative. Today, why aren't we having billboards in front of every slave trading country, embassy, and around the world, opposite the embassy, showing the slave trade and what they done to Africa? Why aren't we having those billboards there in front of all of the embassies? Except those who will come and apologize and they take corrective measures to correct this. Why aren't we singing a song of reparation and they're suppressing it? Why? Why aren't we having annually in all of our countries an annual condemning slavery and recounting the history so that the children can parade, can have the debates and have the discussion and name and shame them in our countries with the embassies so that they are shamed why they are there? Unless they are faced the reality, they must be first, they must be brought up to confront the evil and crime. Today, Africa is behind because they build their economies on the backs of slaves. They build their economies on the back. When slavery was abolished and reparations were paid, and I hope you should know that as well. Reparations were paid, but not to the slaves. They were paid to the slave masters. They were paid to those who were selling slaves. The very same Jews are talking about today. The very same business people who were there selling this, they collected money and they still continue to receive money today. That's why the lady from Namibia raised the issue. How come they pay slaves and they cannot compensate the people of Rwanda, Namibia, from what the Germans did to them? There are a lot of issues, and this discussion must go on. But please don't let anybody tell you and shift your attention from the crimes they committed to tell you that the Africans sold themselves. Africans never went to Europe to tell you what happened.
So I do appreciate the passion, and I do appreciate the history, right? I do appreciate the passion and the history.
And I'm saying there was so much passion because people like you who are still disconnected from your roots, from the continent, when you are searching in your history books, when you're searching to find the truth, and you're being confronted with this kind of a lie, it confuses you. How can our own people do this to us? Nobody did it to you. They did it. And we can call them all by names. The Americans did it. The English did it. The French did it. The Spanish did it. The Portuguese did it. And the Jews did it. And the Jews were present at every point in the slave trade more than any other group. And people should research this thing and know it. And let them not fool any African that they were sold by their own. Yes, when you have one or two people, you coerce them, you pressure them, and then you have it done, and you find some other criminal elements to join with you that doesn't indict Africa and Africans and the people of the continent.
So we have a call here, but I'm not sure how we're going to take it live. I've been pulling this through my...
No, you can just repeat what it said, no problem.
Okay, so go ahead, tell me what you want to say. I can hear you, go ahead. Yes, I can hear you. You have to be quick. Because they can't hear you on the radio, so I'm going to try to repeat what you said. Okay, so what I'm gonna need you to do, because I'm dead and I'm not speaking in the ear, so while you're speaking to me, they can't hear you. So I don't know if you have access to getting on my Facebook page, but you can actually make your comments there and then I can repeat it. Okay? Uh-huh. Okay. Well, I'm not gonna be able to repeat that. You can come on and mention that if you can get on the live, all right? Thanks for tuning in on the call. So that was a call. He had a lot to say, but I didn't want to leave it dead space. But he was saying a lot of these are not in the books, of course, right? And what I wanted to share, and I appreciate the background. We're definitely going to have this conversation again, Ambassador Ballout. But what I left with was that the care, the passion, and the interest that the Africans in Africa have about the slave trade, right? This conversation initially was about talking about how the USVI has an influence in Liberia. But with that, you cannot get away with the slave trade, right? And so when I was in Nigeria, thankful to St. Kitts and Nevis government and a career consult, is that I learned that Africans are very passionate about what happened during the slave trade. They feel impacted. Even now, you can hear those who are listening on the radio airwaves. You could just see somebody just called in. I can get in text saying that they love this conversation is powerful. But that I was amazed about the passion and the interest even till now about what happened. And I didn't know that. And I don't think many people really know that, right? And so I appreciate you sharing. And when I've had conversation with people about, oh, well, when I was in Africa, they said that they didn't sell the Africans. And they're like, what? And so I was like, well, where did we get that narrative from? And so I will definitely, we could have a longer conversation. I'd love to have you on my TV show, which I can have a longer conversation. And maybe when we close out here, we could stay on the live because people, unless you have something else to do for a few more minutes, because I do have to close out in a few. But one thing I wanted to mention, let me see, is that I think one of my questions was, what is a misconception about Africa? What is one misconception you wanted to share? But I think the biggest one is you can say today is that, they said that Africans did not sell Africans into slavery. And we need to take back the narrative. We need to have this narrative shared or discussed further. And so what's the opportunity now? So we're talking about the connection with Africa and the Caribbean. Before I get into that, I wanted to say, I also appreciate that many of the Africans in Nigeria would say, oh, those are our African islands. And so you didn't even just consider it as the Caribbean, you consider us as African diaspora. So what is the opportunity now to reconnect and moving in, and what it would look like to move forward?
Well, again, like I said, just the biggest misconception, I think we try to handle that elephant in the room. Don't let anybody fool you. Not only did they take people from Africa as slaves, they came back here and made African slaves. They colonized Africa, beat Africa. Look at the history with Belgium and the Congo. Look at the history of the French in West Africa. Look at the history of the British, the entire continent. Look what they did, how they carved it up in Europe. These people didn't have any respect for Africa and Africans. So when they've committed these atrocities, when we want to collectively deal with it, they want to divide us. So no one should listen to that. What I do agree with you, beyond the fact that we have shared history and troubles, the future has to be shared opportunities and progress. So today, to begin with, I think a lot of people, the Caribbeans, don't know about Africa. And it's safe to say that a lot of people from Africa don't know about the Caribbeans. We don't know the shared history. We don't know that it is only initiative like what you just did a couple of months ago that can bring people together and start a conversation. So I really, really appreciate and commend you for that. Moving forward, there was a great deal of discussions on economic venture. Okay, we do know the distance and the complexities surrounding travel makes our trade and everything a little difficult, but not impossible. On the political front and diplomatic front, I think the Caribbean should be absorbed into the African Union. I think we should be able to speak and sit at one global table, you know, and as member states. I think we you don't have the land you need for agriculture. So that was raised repeatedly here in these meetings. We had the conference, the summit. So there is a need for that kind of a partnership. You do have your own expertise and your own resources, and Africa may have their expertise, resources, and part of the resources, the land space. So yes, in agriculture, a lot can be done. I know Liberia is willing and waiting for any country in the Caribbean, and and if any country should stand up right now, I'm talking to the Virgin Island. You already a part of Liberia in our history. You are part of us. You're already part of us. We do hold you in high esteem already. We do have shared history. Your space is there that we will be more than willing to accommodate you, and to extend the same visa-free waiver privilege we just signed with the Barbados. A huge Liberian delegation went over to visit in the Caribbean, a great number, hundreds of them. So yes, we do have a lot to share, but investment opportunities. I can speak for Liberia and conservatively for Africa. You will have a continent with open arms. Liberia is very willing and interested. We said that to the leaders of Barbados, who themselves were there in Liberia quite recently, and not that's the first time. So, and Liberian leaders have gone over to the Barbados. We've had this kind of a sustained relationship, and we invite you to join in the circle of friends and extend it to the rest of the islands. So we are not people from another place. We are all of the same place. You are all brothers and sisters. And while you may be separated by the oceans, miles and miles away, taken away by evil ones, just know you're just a call away, a plane away from home, and anywhere else in the African continent. I can speak for Africa in that regard. You are going to be so well received and so welcome that it reassures you that after all, you have a place to go home to. In Liberia, like I said, slaves were not taken from Liberia, they were returned to Liberia. So we have a group of people from all over. We do have E.J. Roy, one former now free slave who had returned home. He is of Igbo descent. Igbo is a tribe in Nigeria. He was one time president of Liberia. Okay, so Liberia is just that beautiful experiment of people, free slaves from all over Africa, who had one thing in common: freedom. Hence the name Liberia, land of the free. When they came, they kissed the soil. There was nothing there. It wasn't a built society. They died upon arrival from illnesses, diarrhea, and malaria. They didn't give up. They came. And today we build a thriving nation that we can boast of 178 years of democratic space with 26 presidents, and the leader and champion of African liberation and decolonization. We are a proud nation who stood tall against the adversaries of the continent. So yes, you have a place, and the history is rich. And part of the Liberia history that made it even richer was people like your own son, Edward Blyden, who we continue to hold in very high esteem, who has contributed enormously to Liberia. He was a minister of state. He was an ambassador representing Liberia to United States and to Europe and all of that. And because of him, we're proud to identify with you as one of yours and you one of ours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ballout. Again, this is Ambassador John A. Ballout Jr. He's ambassador from Liberia to Nigeria, and he's in the embassy in Nigeria right now. We appreciate the conversation and the insights you gave to us today. Again, I was mentioning this on my show past couple of weeks, but for those who hear the passion, this is what I experienced when I was in Nigeria continuously, the conversations that was happening. I was not I didn't know that I was going to be engulfed in these conversations, but it happened, and it was a piece that I didn't
Thank you
know.
for the invitation. I wish you all the best.
Thank
What
you
is
so
that
much.
closing you say again? What do I say?
Oh, I am Ambassador John Ballout, and I'm making it happen. Are you?
I am Ambassador John Ballout, and I'm making it happen. Are you? Thank you.
Thank you so
It's always
much.
a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
You
Bye-bye.
too. We talk soon. Thank you. And that was Ambassador John Ballout. We appreciate him for being with us today. And the passion, like I said to you all a couple weeks in my conversations on my monologues, these are the kind of conversations that was happening, and that we need to revisit and think about the narratives that we've been given, and that they're very welcoming in different parts of Africa. We'll have more conversations. I will have him on my TV show, and I definitely have more content to share with you guys of what I saw and experienced in Nigeria. So thanks so much for tuning in with us today. The conversation was about originally was about USVI and how we are connected to the formation of Liberia, specifically Edward Blyden being part of the Pan-Africanism and doing amazing things in Liberia, and he's still highly regarded as through him we are as well. And so we have continue to have more conversations. And so remember, our roots run deeper than we think, and be reminded that as Virgin Islanders, our culture stretches across to the continent of Africa. So be reminded, we're not just Caribbean people, we are Africans in the Caribbean. And so thank you so much for joining us today. I'll be back again next week, Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. As I always have an amazing rest of the day and the week. We'll connect again on Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. If you don't see something happening, create it, be the change. And until next time, keep thinking outside the box, coloring outside the lines, and remember, it's about you, me, we. So make it happen.